However, seen grows, further presence. Has your phantom devil ever followed you around? Ever leave your body for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you are crazy either. As some people experience the phantom realm as an amputation, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Booker, and explaining the fate of the human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though this phantom could be the result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it, they can also pop up in normal brains as a result of powerful emotion, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinformation is severely lowered. Many happy people have ghost experiences and do not suffer from over brain damage, self-regard. Normal brains can easily be tricked about the thought or action at distance to they themselves have the image over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it climb out of the dream, take control over their hand in order to write a message from beyond. If one's own hand does not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. As a research, BS amputees often describe not only the presence of a phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain not associated with the pain that should no longer exist since the limb with its nerve has been removed.今回読みにくいわ。Has a phantom devil ever followed them around? Everybody for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you're crazy either. As some people experience a phantom limb after amputation, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Berger, and expecting the future of the human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though the phantom could be the result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it, they can also pop up in normal brains as a result of powerful emotions, such as intense on the space surrounding it. They can also pop up in normal brains as a result of powerful emotions, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinter- misinterpretations, extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinterpretation is significantly lowered. Many healthy people have ghost experiences and do not suffer from over brain damage, said Berger. Normal brain can easily be tricked about the source of an action at a distance that they themselves have the image over. He pointed to, he pointed to the example. Brain damage, said Berger. Normal brain can easily be tricked about the source of an action at a distance that they themselves have an image over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it claim as a being take control of their hands in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hands do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. As a research bears this out, amputees often describe not only the presence of a phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb, pain that should no longer exist, since the limb with the nerve has been removed. Human entities might not be supernatural experiences, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy either. As some, as some people, as an implication, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Bigger Booger, in X-Ray View, Nervous System. In an article he wrote, there will be phantom could be that distinguish between the body and space surrounding. They can also pop up in normal brain as a result of powerful emotion, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinterpretation is very low. Many healthy people have ghostly experiences and do not suffer from brain damage. Subburger, no brain can easily be tricked about the source of an action at a distance that they themselves have an agency over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it claim the other being take control of their hand in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research bear this out. Amputees often describe not only the presence of a phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb. Pain that should no longer exist since the limb, with its nerve, has been removed. 聞き取れるけど文章がめんどくさい。何言ってかわかんねえよ。Have you ever seen a ghost felt a presence 気配 as you found the devil 幻の分身ファントム幻の幻のファントムダブル分身ever follow you around ついてくる付きまとう ever leave your body 体を離れる for a few minutes しばらくの間 for a few minutes it might be not be supernatural experience these might not be supernatural experiences 超自然的な経験ではないかもしれないが but they don't necessarily mean 必ずしも意味しませんよ。あなたが狂ってるということも意味しない。User As some people experience a phantom limb after an amputation 切断手足の切断手術を行った後 amputation as some people experience a phantom limb 原子を経験するように you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of entire body 経験するかもしれない全身の気配を幻の According to Peter Brugger an expert in the field of the human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though these phantoms could be the result of damage to the part of the brain. それらの幻は could be the result 可能性がある damage to the part of the brain 脳の一部への損傷の結果による による結果によるものかもしれない。可能性があるにもかかわらず、to the part of the brain that help distinguish between the body and the space surroundings、体と周りを区別する機能、区別することを助ける脳の一部。They can also pop up in normal brains にもかかわらず、they can also pop up、the phantom だね。These phantom can also pop up 突然現れる in normal brains as a result 何々の結果として of powerful emotions such as intense fear 強い恐怖、悲しみ、えぐい happiness, extreme happiness. In case of brain damage 脳の損傷の場合 the threshold 5人違う域値 threshold 限界水準域値 threshold the threshold for misinterpretations 認識 misinterpretation 誤った認識の域値が simply loud 低くなるが simply 低くなるんです。simply ただどうしてもわかりやすくさが simply 単純にわかりやすく simply ただ単に非常になって本当にとてもないので simply どうしてもただ単にわかりやすくどうしまあ、とにかく強調してるっていうことやな simply load Many healthy people have growth experiences 多くの健康の人も have growth experience 減塩の経験はある and don't suffer from over brain damage 明白な明らかな脳の損傷を患っていなくても do not suffer from over brain damage said the blogger Normal brain can easily be tricked about the source of an action at a distance普通の脳も can easily 簡単に騙される about the source of an action at a distance 遠隔作用 action at a distance 遠くのアクション遠隔作用か遠くの動作遠隔作用の出所ソース源のソースについて簡単に騙されることがある source of an action at a distance that they themselves have an agency over 実は脳が自分自身で遠隔作用を行っているにもかかわらず they the brains themselves have the agency over 力を及ぼしている have the agency over have them they themselves that they themselves have the agency over the source of an action at a distance ねえ、遠隔性の力を及ぼしている。that イコール an action at そうだよね。先行詞は the action the an action at a distance なるほど。agency 代理店だよね。作用、力、作用、働き、 to have the agency over have the agency over action at the distance. そう遠隔作用に、作用している。何を言うとんねん。遠隔作用に力を及ぼしている。まあ、なんか、力を及ぼしている。彼ら自身が力を及ぼしている遠隔作用の出所に、騙される。自分自身でやってんのに騙されるから、自分自身で成長なのも、実は脳が自分自身で遠隔作用を行っているにもかかわらずっていう逆説的なね、訳し方になってるわけよ。Trick about the source of action at distance that they themselves have the agency over action at the distance. He points to the example of automatic writing. She accelerated to the example. 自動手記。自動書記の例を挙げる。point to the example. 挙げる。指摘じゃなくて挙げるっていう。なんか喉が。in which そこでは those who practice it そう行っている人は claim 主張します other being take control of their hands 他人が take control of 彼らの手をコントロールしてる in order to write message from beyond あの世から意味わかんねえわ何を言うとんねんこの場合、自動書記が自動書記を行っている人たちは、他の存在があの世からメッセージを書かせるために彼らの手をコントロールしていると言い張るのだ。意味がわからん。何を言うとんねん。彼は自動書記の例を挙げているが、この場合、自動書記を行っている人たちは、他の存在があの世からメッセージを書かせるために彼らの手をコントロールしていると言い張るのだ。いや、はぁ、何を言うとんねん。If one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action. もし one's own hand を、one's own hand を、誰かの手、自分自身の手が do not seem to obey 従ってないようである。one's own brain 自分の頭に従ってないようであるとしたら、the brain must construct 脳は構成しなければならない。something else 他の何か to be responsible for the action 行動に責任を持つ行動の起因となる何かを構成しなければならない。もし自分自身の手が自分の脳に従っていないように思われるなら、脳はその行為の原因となっている何か別のものを構成しなくてはならないと彼は言う。He said, as a researcher bear this out. bear out 何々が正しいことを示す。bear out bear 耐える。もう19分か。対処する、耐える、負担する、支える。産む、そう。bear。bear じゃない、bear だな。そう、bear だ。bear out。bear A out A。何々のが正しいことを示す、裏付ける。bear out A out。 As a research, 他の研究もプロデューサーこれを支持する。Amputees often describe 切断。Amputees 手足の切断手術を受けた人たちは often describe not only the presence of a phantom limb 原子の存在気配を説明するだけでなく but the presence of the body pain was associated with the limb. The presence 気配 but the body pain かつて the body pain was associated with that limb. limb 手足にあった手足から連想されるかつて連想される手足の激しい痛み pain that should no longer exist since the limb もはや存在しない the limb with its nervous 神経も手足ももはや存在しないので has been removed 取り去られた手足や神経はもはや存在しないので起こるはずのない痛みなるほどな。繰り返しわけだ。pain を。The presence of the belly pain was associated with that limb. Pain that should わざわざここで繰り返して、この痛みのことを修飾しているわけだ。かつて、その死と結びついていた with that limb。かつて手足と結びついていた凄まじい痛みをそのものの存在について語ることが多いのであるが、pain that should no longer exist since limb should no longer exist since だから接続詞だ since the limb with this nervous has been removed はい、なるほど読みにくいHowever, singles felt a presence has a phantom double ever flow your life. Ever leave your body for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you're crazy either. Some people experience a phantom dream after amputation. You could be experiencing or experience a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Berger, an expert in the field of human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though the phantom could be the result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it. They can also pop up in normal brain as a result of powerful emotion, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinterpretation is simply low. Many healthy people have ghostly experiences and do not suffer from over brain damage, said Brugger. No brain can easily be tricked. As the source of an action at a distance, they themselves have the engine shiver. He pointed to the example of Altman's writing, in which those who practice it claim other beings take control of their hand in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hand does not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research bear this out. Amputees often describe not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb. Pain that not uh, uh, How do you phantom devil ever alone? Ever leave your body for a few moments? A read might not be shared by natural experiences, but it don't necessarily mean you're crazy either. As some people, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Berger, an expert in the field of the human nervous system. In an article here she wrote, though the phantom could be the result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it, they can also pop up in the lower brain as a result of powerful emotions such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinterpretation is ever lower. Among healthy people have drastic expenses and do not suffer from over brain damage separately. Normal brain can easily be tricked with social and efficient resistance that they themselves have agency over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it claim that the brain take control of their hand in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for action. You say, our research will be research. MT is often described not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with that pain that no longer exists since the limb with its arm has been removed. ちょっと後半、うん、construct something else to be responsible for action, he said. Other research, peer research, amputees often describe not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb, pain that should no longer exist, since the limb with the nerve has been removed. Write a message from beyond. If one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research bear this out. Empathy is often described not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb. Pain that should no longer exist since the limb with its nerves has been removed. In order to write messages from beyond, if one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research bear this out. Empathy is often described not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of belly pain once associated with the limb, pain that should no longer exist since the limb with its mouth has been removed with its nerves. Have you ever seen a ghost? Felt a presence? Has your phantom devil ever followed you around? Ever leave your body for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you were crazy either. As some people experience a phantom limb after an amputation, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Brugger, an expert in the field of the human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though these phantoms could be the result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it, they can also pop up in normal brain as a result of powerful emotions, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold of misinflation is simply lower. Many heavy people have growth experiences and do not suffer from over brain damage, say Burger. Normally, brains can easily be tricked to avoid the social interaction at a distance. They have themselves have been agents over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it claim as a wing to take control of the hand in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hands do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research bear this out. Amputee is often described not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the body pain once associated with the limb. Pain that should no longer exist since the limb, with it now, have been moved. Uh, mm. Number 31. More recently, however, there has been conflicting officer approach to controlling death, euthanasia. It is understandable for a victim of a fatal disease to think of running on his own death. After all, when continuing life will only bring greater suffering, what's the point in living? This logic has been tested recently in the federal court system, and the result indicates the right to die rapidly becoming an issue that must be addressed directly in these communities. For example, a Washington state law banning doctors' suicide was struck down. The reason being that prohibiting suicide violates the constitutional rights of terminally ill, mentally competent patients who want to kill themselves with a doctor's prescription. The intention of such a law has been justified as a way of getting rid of suffering. Despite this difference, euthanasia is often understood to be an objectionable act intended to cause the death of a patient. It seems to me that euthanasia is characteristic of a society that no longer has faith in the purpose or intention of God. 早い。More recently, however, there has been a completely opposite approach to countering death. Euthanasia. It is understandable for a victim of fatal disease to think of bringing on his own death. After all, when continuing life, they only bring to the oh my god. We continue life and only for suffering. 这。Euthanasia. It is understandable for a victim of a fatal disease to think of bringing on his own death. After all, when continuing life only brings little suffering, what's the point in living? This logic has been tested recently in the federal court system, and the result indicates that the right of to die is rapidly becoming an issue that must be addressed directly by religious communities. For example, a Washington state law banning doctor-assisted suicide has struck down. The reason being that prohibiting assisted suicide violates the constitutional right of terminally ill, mentally competent patients who want to kill themselves with doctor prescription. The intention of such law has been justified as a way of getting rid of suffering. Despite this defense, euthanasia is often understood to be an objectionable act intended to cause the death of a patient. It seems to me that euthanasia is characteristic of society that no longer has faith in the purpose and intention of God. Right. More recently, however, there has been a completely absolute approach to countering death. Euthanasia. It is understandable for a victim of a fatal disease to think of bringing on his own death. After all, when continuing life will only bring greater suffering, what's the point in living? This logic has been tested recently in the federal court system, and the results indicate that the right to die is rapidly becoming an issue that must be addressed directly by religious communities. For example, a Washington state law banning doctor-assisted suicide was struck down. The reason being that prohibiting assisted suicide violates the constitutional rights of terminally ill, mentally confident patients who want to kill themselves without doctor prescription. The intention of such a law has been justified as a way of getting rid of suffering. Despite this defense, euthanasia is often understood to be an objectionable act intended to cause the death of the patient. It seemed to me the euthanasia characteristic of society that no longer has faith in the purpose and the intention of God. 早いわ。もう何言ってるかわかんないもんな。In many countries, organ transplant is considered the most appropriate patient for incurable diseases of a liver. In June 1997, Japan legalized organ transplant from brain-dead donors, and the first transplant was performed in 1999. During the first 3 years after legalization, however, only 4 such transplants were performed, though there were numerous potential recipients. One obstacle facing the medical community is that the law will not define brain death as a human death, it only allows brain-dead patients to donate organs. Even now, many Japanese are uncomfortable medical community is that the brain death as human death, yet only allows brain-dead patients to donate organs. Even now, many Japanese are uncomfortable with the idea of removing organs from the body with a beating heart, even if the brain does not function. As a result, no national consensus on brain death has been reached, and organs are in short supply. To cope with this shortage, animal organs, such as bone marrow and pig livers, can be used. In the US, more than 30 animal-to-human transplants have been performed since 1963. Our may, however, the body can reject the organ or contract an animal disease, and some people oppose such transplant for ethical reasons. In many countries, organ transplants are considered the most appropriate treatment for patients with incurable disease of vital organs, such as the heart and liver. In June 1997, Japan legalized organ transplant from brain-dead donors, and the first transplant was performed in 1999. During the first 3 years after legalization, however, only 4 such transplants were performed, though there were numerous potential recipients. One obstacle facing the medical community is that the law does not define brain death as human death, it only allows brain-dead patients to donate organs. Even now, many Japanese are uncomfortable with the idea of removing a beating heart, even if they are functioning. As a result, no national consensus on brain death has been reached, and organs are in short supply. To cope with this can be used. In the US, more than 30 animal-to-human transplants have been performed since 1980. Obstacles remain, however. The body can reject the organ or contract an animal disease, and some people oppose such transplant for ethical reasons. Hmm. In many countries, organ transplants are considered the most appropriate treatment for patients with incurable diseases of vital organs, such as the heart and liver. In June 1997, Japan legalized organ transplant from brain-dead donors, and the first transplant was performed in 1999. During the first 3 years after legalization, however, only 4 such transplants were performed, though there were numerous potential recipients. One obstacle facing the medical community is that the law does not define brain death as human death, yet only allows brain-dead patients to donate organs. Even now, many Japanese are uncomfortable with the idea of removing organs from a body with a beating heart, even if the brain is not functioning. As a result, no national consensus on brain death has been reached, and organs are in short supply. To cope with this shortage, animal organs, such as bamboo and pig liver, can be used. In the US, more than 30 animal-to-human transplants have been performed since 1963. Obstacles remain, however. The body can reject the organ or contract the animal disease, and some people. Yeah. remain, however. The body can reject the organ or contract. はい。頼むわ。Remain, however. The body can reject the organ or contract an animal disease, and some people approach such transplant for ethical reasons. Ah, 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 ah. No. Number 32. However, senior girls felt a presence. Has a phantom devil ever followed you around? Ever leave your body for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you are crazy either. And some people experience a phantom limb after amputation. You could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of the entire body, according to Peter Brugger, and expressing the fear of the human nervous system. An electrical field, those with phantom damage, part of the brain that have they can also pop up in our brain as a result of powerful emotion, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold for misinterpretations uh, are actually over. He pointed out of writing, in which those who practice it climb out of pain, take control of their hands, in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hands do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be action, he said. Other research will dissolve. Amputees often describe not only the presence of a phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb. Pain that should no longer exist, since the limb with its nerves have been removed. However, senior girls felt a presence. Has your phantom devil ever followed you around? Ever leave your body for a few moments? These might not be supernatural experiences, but they don't necessarily mean you're crazy either. As some people experience a phantom limb after amputation, you could be experiencing the presence of a phantom of entire body, according to Peter Brugger, an expanded field of the human nervous system. In an article he wrote, though the phantom could be a result of damage to the part of the brain that helps distinguish between the body and the space surrounding it, they can also pop up in normal brains as a result of prior emotion, such as intense fear, sadness, or extreme happiness. In case of brain damage, the threshold of misinterpretation is simply lowered. Many healthy people have gross experiences and do not suffer from over brain damage, said Berger. Normal brains can easily be tricked about the source of an action at a distance that they themselves have an agency over. He pointed to the example of automatic writing, in which those who practice it claim other beings take control with their hands in order to write messages from beyond. If one's own hand do not seem to obey one's own brain, the brain must construct something else to be responsible for the action, he said. Other research really that amputees often describe not only the presence of phantom limb, but the presence of the very pain once associated with the limb, pain that should no longer exist, since the limb with its nerves have been removed. こんなとこか。あと18、 18、2月の24。24か。